Hello friends, welcome back to Digitalk. In this session, we will see how we can create our deployment in Kubernetes. So in previous sessions, we have seen the format of YAML file, how we define the different values or parameters in the YAML file. Okay, and along with that, we have created one pod as well. Okay, so that was a pod. That means the resources type that we have defined in the YAML file as pod. Now we are going to create a deployment. Okay, and inside this deployment, we will create one pod with multiple containers. So for example, we are going to create two containers inside one pod. Okay, and this will be the deployment as a resource. So now we can directly create the pod as well, but that is not recommended. We always go with the deployment because this deployment has a lot of features like auto scaling, rollback, and then multiple features are there, which is supported by the deployment, not by the pod. So let me show you what I'm talking about. So this we have seen in the previous session as well when we discussed about the YAML file. Okay, so the kind is a kind of resource that we are going to create. Okay, you can define here pod as well, so it will automatically create a pod for you based on the configurations. Okay, but we go with the deployment always. Okay, because this deployment, as I said, has a many features. So let me give you a brief about the YAML file again. So the first thing is the API version, which API version you are going to use. Okay, and if you are not sure, then you have different commands to check as well. So this is the one of the command which you can run in your Kubernetes environment. Okay, this will give you the application version, right? So this you have to use in the YAML file here. Okay, now we are going to create the deployment. This is the metadata of this deployment, right? So name, that means this is the metadata of this deployment, and the name we have defined as nginx-deployment. That means this is the name for the deployment that we're creating. And these are the specifications of the pod, which is going to be created inside this deployment. So replica one, that means we need or we are going to create one pod in this deployment. Okay, so if you need more than one pod, okay, then you can increase the count here. For example, if you would like to create the two pods, then you can make it two. So this deployment will always ensure that you always have two pod up and running always. Okay, in case one of the deployment get crashed due to any reasons, it will automatically start it. Okay, and this feature is not available if you are going to directly create the pod here. Okay, so this is one of the feature of the deployment. Okay, so I'm going to create one pod only, and this is the selector. Okay, selector means your match labels and then app colon nginx. So okay, so this is the name of the deployment, and inside this deployment you can have the multiple pods, right? As I said, if you are going to increase this value, this will create that number of particular pod that you are going to specify here. So in case you have multiple pods, okay, so then each pod inside this deployment will be identified by this label. Okay, so for example, if I will create 4 pods here inside this deployment, then each pod will get the label of app nginx. Okay, so now I'm going to create only one pod, so I will make it one. So this pod will get the label of nginx, okay, which is specified inside the match labels. Okay, now inside the template, okay, we define the values, or you can say the specifications that we go for the containers. Okay, so inside this template, you can see that if I go to containers, then I have defined two containers, one with the name of nginx-1 and second with the name of nginx-2. Okay, and this container will be based on the nginx image. Okay, this will create a web server, which is nginx web server image. Okay, in the container 1, in the container 2 as well. And to container 1, it is going to assign the port 8080, and in container 2, it is going to assign the port 8181 to the nginx. Okay, now this app which we defined inside the template, this should be same as whatever we have defined here in the specification of the deployment, because this label, okay, this is a label for each and every container. Okay, and these containers are running inside the pods. So whatever the label that we have defined for the pods, okay, the same label we have to define inside the label inside the template as well. So make sure this should be matching, right? So this is the way how we define the YAML file, okay, and for the deployment, where we would like to create one replica, or you can say the one pod with the two containers inside that one. Okay, so you can easily modify this value based on the number of pod you need, And similarly, if you need a more container inside the pod, then you can add a separate section like this one. So this is the first section for the first container. This is the section for the second container. Similarly, you can add more sections if you would like to have a more containers inside the pod. Okay. So now I have shown you how to check the API version. Now, so let me execute this deployment. So let me show you how to create this one. So for that, the command is kubectl apply -f and the name of the YAML file. Okay, this is the name of YAML file which we have this contents. So let me go to here. Okay, and let me run this deployment. Now you can see that the deployment has been created, right? So now we have a deployment is created. So you can check the status of deployment which you have created. Okay, so let me copy it again. Okay, so now you can see that kubectl get deployment. This is the command to check all the deployments, right? So now this is a deployment that we have created. It is up and running one by one. Okay, inside this deployment, you have one pod only, right? If I go back here and I will show you replicas only one, right? That's why it is showing ready one by one. If you will define here two pods, it will show you two by two. Okay, if all two pods are up and running. Okay, so now we can check the status of pod as well. Let me check the status of pod, right? So this is the name of deployment. Let me show you here, right? This is the deployment that we have created. Inside this deployment, we have created one replica. That means one pod, right? So that's why this kubectl get pod is showing you only the one pod. Okay. So now inside that you can see that 1 by 2 and error. So that means inside this pod we have a two containers. Out of two containers, only one is up and running. Okay, there is a problem with the one pod. Okay, that's why it is showing 1 by 2. If your both containers are up and running, then you will see the 2 by 2, that means up and running. Okay, so as of now, you can ignore it. There is a specific reason for that, why this is giving the error. Okay, that we will cover in the next other session. Okay, why this is giving error. That is due to some port conflicts. Okay, so that we will cover in the config map. The once we will discuss about the config map of this Kubernetes. So there we will cover this one. So as of now, what you can understand, we have created a deployment. This is the command to check the name of deployment, status of deployment. And this is the command which you can check the status of pod. And here you can check the status of the containers which is running inside this pod. Right. So now we have checked the status of deployment. We have checked the status of pod. Okay. Now if you would like to check for a specific pod, okay, that is created by a specific deployment. So what you can do, so here you can give the name of the label which you have given. So if you will give the name of pod and hyphen label, then it will give you a specific. Okay, otherwise what will happen when you will run this command, you may have a multiple pods running in your system. So it will list all the pods. As of now, I have only one. It is displaying only one. So you can list the pod with the help of label as well, right? This is the label that we have given here. This is a label. So if you give the label here, then it will only list the pod which is running inside this particular label. This is one of the use of label, right? So now if you would like to check the logs, okay, now you can see that there are two containers, or maybe if it is one is giving error, you would have to check the logs. What is the problem with that particular? Okay, you either, so for that you can either go inside the container. Okay, but now the container is not running, so you can't able to do, or you can't able to go or switch inside the container because it is not running. Okay, so the command that check the logs is kubectl logs, then your pod name -c and your container name. So this will give you the log of a particular container. So let me check the log of the first container. So this is, let me take the name of the pod. So this is the name of the pod I have to give here, and the name of the container. Okay, so that I can take from the here as well. YAML file. This is the name of the first container, right? So what I will do, I will replace this -c and container name with the container name. So this is the command you can run to check the log of the first container. Similarly, you can replace the name of second container, and then you can check the logs of second container as well. So let me run this command. Let me show you. Okay, now you can see that this is the logs of the container, right? First container. And similarly, let me run for the second. Okay, let me copy it again. Okay, now you can see these are the logs of the second container. And now because second container is not running, which we have seen here, right? Only one is running out of two. So what is the error we can see? The address is already in use. That means the address that we have given here, there is a problem with this one. It is not getting reflected. Okay, now what is the reason of that? I will explain you once we will cover the config map. Okay, so now this is the way how we can check the logs. And now if you would like to delete this particular pod or deployment, so now I will show you one of the feature of the pod as well, or you can say for the deployment. Okay, so when in the initial session when we have created the pod, we ran the command kubectl delete and the pod and pod name, the pod was deleted, right? But now if I will go to delete the pod, okay, it will delete the pod and then it will automatically create a new pod instead of that one automatically. Reason is that this is deployment. This is not the specific pod. The kind is deployment. That means it ensures that the number of replicas which is mentioned here always up and running in the cluster. So now the minimum replicas is 1. So if I'm going to delete the pod, then it will automatically create a one pod for me. Okay, for example, let me show you. And what is the name of pod? This is the name of the pod, right? So let me give the pod name here. Okay, and let me run the command. Let me show you. If I will delete this pod, you can see the pod is deleted. And now if I check the status of get pods, now you can see that 0 by 2 and then container creating. So it deleted the pod, but immediately after deletion of the pod, it recognized that for this particular deployment, the minimum replicas is 1. And this is a feature of deployment. So it will automatically create one pod for you after the deletion. Now you can see that it got some error. Okay, so 1 by 2 containers, the same problem that we have received earlier, right? So now that you can see that deployment has been created again, okay, with 2 containers. One is not running. We know about the reason for that one, right? So this is one of the feature of deployment as well, where if you are going to delete any of the pod that or any of the pods get crashed due to any reasons, it will ensure that the minimum number of replicas should be up and running. So it will automatically create a new pod for you and it will start that one. This is one of the feature of the deployment. Now, if you would like to delete this pod, so what you can do for that, you have to delete the deployment. So if you will delete the deployment, that means if we are going to delete this name, which is the name of deployment, then it is going to delete all the pod and the corresponding containers, and it will not going to create that again, right? Because we are deleting from the root, right? So now you can delete it from the using the deployment name, okay? And after that, you can see it is deleted. And now if you go to see the pod, then you will not see any pod. It will not create because we have deleted the deployment, right? So this is the features of deployment, how we define the deployment in the YAML file, how we create the YAML file for the deployments, and then these are different commands for the creation of the deployment and then for validations of the logs along with the status. Thank you.